am at the World's Storytelling Cafe, and I just told the story about my dad and my grandparents and my uncles and my aunts. I hope none of them will come and watch this because I told the truth about them. But I have to tell you something. I'm on land that my grandmother and grandfather, on the other side of my family, my mother's parents, bought and homesteaded here for a long time. They had fruit trees, and they raised fruit and pecans, and they raised everything that they ate here. Now, we don't farm here anymore because we don't have most of the land, but we do have the house. And I really think this is a pretty place. I've really enjoyed living here. Being in Texas, I want to tell you something. Not every Texan has a horse. Most of us do not have any oil wells. And we don't know how to rope and lariat stuff like they do on television. That's all. We just live like ordinary people over in Louisiana do. And we eat just as well too. Now I want to tell you a story that one of our neighbors told. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I'm going to tell it anyhow. There was a fellow by the name of Jack, and he married really well. He married a woman who could do anything with her hands. Almost as good as my sister Mary. I'll tell you what, Jack and his wife moved off to this little island. It was only about 3 or 4 acres big, and nobody had claimed it. So Jack just went on it, and he built him a house and started having children. Well, he had about 10 or so kids. And one day he was sitting there in his rocking chair that he had made. He made everything that they owned. And she cooked all the time because she had all these children to feed. And they caught fish and they ate and they raised a little garden and everything was going pretty well. Well, one day this big boat shows up and it comes right in to where Jack and them were living. And this guy gets off of the boat and he has on a gold robe and a crown and he has a flag. Well, it's an odd flag. Jack had never seen it before. It wasn't a Texas flag. It wasn't a United States flag. It was a whole different flag. Did you hear that? I think that's a woodpecker calling to his mate. Now, Jack and his wife and all of the children just looked like this. They all squatted down and got to looking at that feller. Well, he came up to them and he said, he stuck that flag right in the ground and he said, I claim this for the company of, I can't remember what it was. It was some country I'd never heard of before. And I don't remember the name of it. But he shoved that flag right down in the ground. And Jack looked at him and he said, okay, you claim it for a country I had never heard of? Well, you know, back in the 1500s, everybody traveled with flags and they were sticking them here and they were sticking them there and they didn't pay a bit of attention to the people who were living there. He just started claiming stuff. And so Jack knew that. He had gone to school plumb to the 4th grade and he knew about that. And so he looked at the fellow and he said, so are we going to be in your country now? And the fellow said, yes, you will. I would like to spend the night here on your beautiful island that I have now claimed for my country. So Jack said, well, that'll be good. And he had built little huts all over the place, thinking that maybe he would open up a hotel or a motel or somebody would want to spend the night there, a bed and breakfast maybe. Well, this guy just came right on in, and Jack's wife served him up some stew, and the guy said, well, that was real good. I'm ready to go to bed now. And so Jack took him over and he put him on an air mattress that he had blowed up real good. didn't have any holes in it, and he had patched the places where they usually break anyway with some duct tape because he had a lot of duct tape. Anyhow, that fella went sound asleep, and all of a sudden Jack looked and saw that the mosquitoes were surrounding him, and he went and tucked down all of the mosquito netting real good. Now, his wife was a really artistic person, and she had painted beautiful pictures on all of the mosquito nets. And this guy was listening to him, and he was just humming along. Those mosquitoes were humming so loud you could hear them plumb to Galveston. Well, I'll tell you what, the next morning that guy woke up and he said, "We have none of these beautiful singers in our country. I would like to take some of them back." And Jack said, "All right." And he hollered at one of the kids, one of his bigger kids, and he said, "Go get a baby pig, one just about right for cooking," and slit its throat, and then put it out where all those mosquitoes can go right to it, and we'll put it in a basket. So they did. They waited till the mosquitoes got all over that old pig. It just covered it all up. Now, I know that was kind of sad about the baby pig, but they got lots and lots of singers, and they put a lid on top of the basket, and they gave it to the man, and the man said, "Thank you very much. I have claimed this island for my country, and I will be recording it at the Grand Recording Station." And Jack said, "Well, that'll be real nice. Send the folks over. We like to have company." Well, the man left, and they never saw him again. But they had the flag, and they never found out where that flag came from because there wasn't any such flag in any of the encyclopedias that they went to Galveston to look at. So, I don't know, but I've heard that Jack and his wife and his children are still on that island and still doing right well. Hi, I just talked to my friend John Rowe, and believe it or not, I got some really great advice from him on what to wear. So I wore my white cover-up thingy so I won't get cold, and my flowery shirt and my flowery pants. I would have borrowed John's plaid purple and green shorts, but he couldn't find them. He said he hadn't had them out yet. I'm here at the World Storyteller Cafe today because John invited me to be here, and he's not coming, but he told me to come. So I'm here, and I'm here to tell y'all some stories. I'm Trudy Terry, and I'm from Texas. And if you can't understand me, just slow down your hearing. I know that'll be hard for some of you, but you know, you can try. This is my beautiful outdoors, and I'm sitting in a rocking chair that my sister made and put together, and it's got a cowhide bottom, so I'm very comfortable. And I'm just going to tell y'all some stories. First off, about my family. When my dad was a little boy, he and his family lived right on the Sabine River. And the Sabine River is what keeps Texas and Louisiana apart, sometimes together. And when they lived there, they lived with Paul Burton, who was my granny's daddy. Now, he had been a ship captain, and he had gone all around the world in his ship. And on his last voyage, he decided that he wanted to take something home to those two boys. Well, he didn't know it when he got home. He also had two granddaughters. So he brought my daddy, John Henry, and Dave Stanton a monkey. And when he brought that monkey in, my granny looked at it and she said, "With the four I already have here being monkeys, do you think that I need another monkey?" And he just laughed and said, "Y'all will enjoy this monkey." Well, that family lived together. The Ma and the Pa, who were my grandpa and granny, and Paul Burton. Now, Paul Burton got up every single morning and he made coffee, and he would stir that coffee with a little tiny spoon, and it would go tink, 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 tink. And that monkey would sit next to him, and he had his little cup of water, and he put a little spoon in it, and he'd go tink, 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 tink. Well, everybody thought that was real funny. Not only that, when my grandpa would read the newspaper, he always had his glasses down on his nose like this. He would read the newspaper and he'd turn the pages real slow because he was a slow reader, careful reader. Well, that monkey'd sit right next to him. He'd steal Ma's glasses, put them on his little face, and he'd turn his little pages real slow because he was a very careful reader also, that monkey was. Well, that monkey imitated everybody in the household. And I'll tell you about that household. There was my grandpa, Gene, and Granny, Barbara, and there was John Henry and Dave, and two little girls called June Rose, who was a very nice little girl, and Winnie, who was, well, I can't really say it because this is a family program, but she was a handful, more than a handful. She was downright aggravating. But anyhow, my family lived right there on the river, and they ran some cows, and they raised some cotton. They did all kinds of things to make money, because back then there wasn't much doing in Orange. So one evening, it was really Dave's job to go get the cows, but my daddy saw that he hadn't gone and got them, and he couldn't find him. He was hunting him, but he couldn't find Dave. And so he went right down and got those cows himself and brought them back to the house. That old Dave, he was always a dodging work. But I'll tell you something, he thought that he was the biggest joker in the world. He loved to play practical jokes. One time, Granny spent 2 whole weeks making her a new dress. She put it on. She was so happy she was going down. They were having a special church meeting, and she was going down, and she'd be dressed nice and proper this time. And that Dave had set up a bucket of water right over her bedroom. He knew she was in there putting on that new dress. She opened that door, and that water flew all over her, drenched her, and ruined her brand new dress. She didn't have time to wash and starch and iron it. And so she looked at him and she said, "Dave Stanton, you're going to get your comeuppance one of these days. You're going to find out what it means." And Dave said, "Well, I'd like some comeuppance." But he didn't really know what comeuppance was. And then one morning, old Paul got up real early, Paul Burton, and he was stirring his little spoon around his cup, and he put 4 big tablespoons of sugar, because that man had a sweet tooth, and he put it all in his coffee. And he went tink, 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 tink. Well, that tink, tinking had aggravated Dave Stanton, so he had played a joke. And when Paul took a big sip of that coffee, he spit it plumb right out. And Dave had put salt in the sugar bowl. And he knew, and Paul looked at him and he said, "I ought to give you a rawhide whipping, boy, but I'm going to let you get your own comeuppance." So things went on for a little while. Well, the next evening, John Henry was looking for Dave to go with him to get the cows in. John Henry was a hard-working boy, and he always did everything just so. And that kind of aggravated Dave, too. Well, Dave was nowhere to be found, but the two little girls said, "Can we go? Can we go?" And John Henry looked at June Rose and he said, "Well, all right, you can go." And then he looked at Winnie. And Winnie, he knew she was going to be trouble along the way, but he went ahead and took her anyhow because that was his baby sister. So off they went, looking for the cows. So they went through the swamp, took a long walk around. Well, Dave had been hiding in his mama's bedroom under her bed. And when he knew they were gone, he slipped in and got one of her best white sheets and he took it out and shook it. He was going to scare them. He cut 2 eye holes in it where he could see. Well, you know, that monkey had slipped in right after him. And you know what he did? That monkey took out a pillowcase and shook it like that. And he got the scissors and he cut 2 eye holes in it. He didn't know what they were for, but he was going to be ready. So, a sneaky old boy, Dave, snuck up and he got in where it was a scary looking tree. You know those trees that kind of look like witches when it's getting dark? Well, it was right there, and there was a zigzag fence made like that out of saplings. Dave hid in one of the corners under that wicked looking tree, and he waited till they came along and he was going to jump out and scare them. Well, he didn't know it, but that monkey had slipped up right behind him and crawled up on top of that zigzag fence, and he was waiting. Dave put his big old sheet on, and the monkey put on the pillowcase, and the next thing you know, nothing happened because those cows had gone further than they usually do, and it was starting to get dark, and Dave was starting to get kind of scared because he was kind of a superstitious old boy. But in a minute, here along came those old cows, and behind them was John Henry and the 2 little girls. Well, John Henry looked and he saw something. And he just stopped stark still. And he looked around and he said to his little sisters, he said, "Look at there." And one of them said, "Well, that's just old Dave. I can see his feet. He's got the biggest feet of anybody besides Papa." And John Henry said, "I know it's Dave, but look behind him. Look behind him. There's something behind him." And those little girls went, "There is something behind him." And they hollered, "Dave, Dave, watch out, there's something behind you." Well, I know you won't believe this, but Dave looked around and all he saw was a pillowcase with 2 holes, and there was 2 bright eyes shining right at him, and it scared him so bad he started running. He ran through the woods, he ran through, went right past the barn, slid right on into the house, jumped up in his mama's bed and pulled the covers up over his head. And that monkey was chasing right behind him, and John Henry and those 2 little girls were chasing behind the monkey. And Ma and Pa was working outside and they saw something happening, and so they ran behind the kids. And Paul Burton was outside a-spitting and a-whittling, and he put down his knife and he ran too. And they all wound up in Ma's bedroom. And there was Dave standing hiding underneath the sheet. And there was the little monkey jumping up and down trying to pull that sheet down. And him hollering, "No, no, don't take me, old ghost, don't take me, old ghost." Well, you can't believe this, but Ma got to laughing, Paul got to laughing, John Henry got to laughing, June Rose got to laughing, Winnie got to laughing. Everybody was laughing. Paul Burton was laughing. But Dave was not laughing. He was still scared underneath the covers until his mama pulled down that sheet and she said, Dave Stanton, you finally got your comeuppance, and good enough for you. Now, that's a story about my family. I'm here at the World Storytelling Cafe. And you can get on the World Storytelling Cafe by going storytellingcafe.com, and you can listen to all of the tellers, and there are some wonderful tellers on here. Now I'm going to tell you a story that I heard from my friend Elizabeth Beeman, and it starts out like this. Once upon a time there was a little girl and her mother, and they lived in the deep dark woods. But where they lived, it was just a meadow, and there were beautiful flowers all over that meadow. Now the mother would take the little girl out and let her play in the meadow a lot of times, but sometimes she made her stay in the house. The little girl didn't much like staying in the house. She was kind of like my Aunt Winnie. She had a streak of spitefulness in her, or maybe just orneriness, probably just orneriness. Anyhow, one day her mother got up and she said, I'm going to the store into town. Do you want to go with me? And the little girl said, I don't think so, Mama. You talk all the time to those people, and they just talk and talk and talk, and I always get in trouble because I'm always touching something I'm not supposed to be touching. She said, okay, what are you going to do while you're staying home? And the little girl looked and she said, I'm going to clean my room. And the mother said, well, what a wonderful thing to do. Now you stay right here in the house and I'll be back this afternoon. Don't you dare go outside. Don't you open that door. You know, in the deep, dark forest, there are wolves. And the little girl said, I'll stay in, Mama, I promise. Well, the mama looked at her because, you know, mamas give you that look. And she says, you better do what I say. There are wolves out there. And the little girl said, I will, Mama. And so the mama left and she locked the door. And off she went to town. And the little girl ran into her room. She threw all of her toys in her closet. She threw the covers up on her bed. She fluffed up the pillows because, you know, you can always fluff up the pillows. And then she got the broom and she swept, and that was it. And then she decided, I'll go outside just a little bit and I'll pick some flowers and put them on the table. That'll look pretty when Mama comes home. Because she knew she was not going to stay right in the house. So she went and she picked some blue ones, and she picked some red ones, and then she saw some pink ones, and then she saw some white ones, and then she walked into the deep, dark forest, still picking flowers. And she was singing to herself. She was singing, tra-lee, tra-la, tra-lee, tra-la. And she just kept singing and picking more and more flowers. And then she decided, ooh, I'm in the middle of the deep, dark forest. I'm getting out of here. And so she started toward the edge where she could see the meadow. And then all of a sudden, somebody jerked her up by her jacket. Just jerked her up and said, I'm the big wolf. You are going to sing to me because I want to take a nap and I can't go to sleep. You're going to sing to me. And the little girl was so scared she just went Trolley, tra-la, trolley, tra-la. And the old wolf laid down and he put his back against a tree and he started to snore. And the little girl thought, I'll just tiptoe away from him because I don't want him to eat me. And she started tippy-toeing away and he jerked her up again and said, you don't run off. You sing to me. You sing to me the whole time I'm asleep. And he put her down and he said, don't move. Well, you know how she is. So she started singing again. Trolley, tra-la, trolley, tra-la, trolley, tra-la. And the old wolf. Well, the little girl thought about it and she thought, I know what I'll do. I will sneak away and I'll sing louder so it'll sound like I'm still close. And so she began to tiptoe and sing trolley, tra-la, trolley, tra-la, trolley, tra-la. And she started singing louder. Trolley, tra-la, trolley, tra-la. And she was running now. And she was singing as hard as she could. Trolley, tra-la, trolley, tra-la. And that old wolf, she ran through the woods. She ran through the meadow. She ran up to her house. She opened the door and slammed the door. And she lost all of the flowers she had picked. Well, she was sad about that, but she was so glad that she got away from the wolf. When her mama came home, she said, did you go outside? And the little girl said, yes. And she said, what happened? She said, a wolf grabbed me and made me sing. And I don't like singing to wolves, Mama. I'm never leaving the house again unless you go with me. And the mama said, well, that's really good, little girl. I'm glad that you've changed into a good little girl. And that old wolf, he's still out in the forest because every time anybody goes out in that area, and then, all right, now I see you over there. You're getting kind of anxious. I know that you want to hear a real Texas story. Now, I've told you 2 real Texas stories. The one about my Uncle Dave getting his comeuppance, and the one about Jack and his island. Those are really Texas stories. But this story, well, it's a little bit Texas and it's a little bit not. And my cousin Barbara Jean and I were sleeping over at our granny's, and everybody was there. It was at Christmas time and everybody was there. All of my cousins were there. Well, we were the only ones who got a bed at Granny's house. Everybody else had to sleep on the floor or the couch. And we wouldn't go to sleep. We were about 6 years old and we just would not go to sleep. Everybody else, all the big kids were having fun, and we thought we should be having fun too. So finally, one of my older cousins, not much older, but a little bit older, came in and she told us if we would go to sleep, she would tell us a story. And then one of my big boy cousins came in and said, I want to hear this. And she said, well, I'm going to tell him Goldilocks. And he said, yeah, Goldilocks and the 3 horse thieves. Barbara and I looked at each other and we got excited. We'd never heard about Goldilocks and the 3 horse thieves. What could be more Texas than horse thieves? And you know, where we live, it was no man's land in Texas for a long time between the Neches River and the Sabine River. It was no man's land. Nobody claimed it. So a lot of times people running away from the west and from the east came and they settled in Orange County. And Orange County was not a nice place to live, although my family has lived here since it was a county, since before it was a county. And they weren't horse thieves. They were just good, ordinary people. But a lot of horse thieves did come and live there, and there were a lot of stories told about it. So when we heard about Goldilocks, we really got excited. My older boy cousin said, "Well, I'll tell you what happened. Those three horse thieves went off and they rustled cattle and horses, and they brought them home and put them in their own corral in the deep, dark woods. And then they made up beds. Well, the oldest one, he made him up a bed full of cotton. It was pretty good, but it was pretty hard. And the next one, he made up his bed full of straw. And that was a stinking bed, I'll tell you what. But the third one filled his bed full of feathers. Now, you might ask where he got those feathers, but they had been duck hunting. And he had, because he was the youngest, he had to be the one who pulled out the feathers and cooked the ducks. So he had a bunch of duck feathers and he put them all in his bed. Well, that old cabin that they were living in was pretty raunchy, I'll tell you what. So they had to build them a chair. Well, they already had a table in there, and so each one of them built them a chair. Well, the oldest one, he did a pretty good job. He made him a great big old chair that he could sit in and tell them what else to do. The middle's one, he just didn't know how to build anything, and his old chair had splinters all in it. If you sat on that chair, you got a splinter in your hiney. So the third one, he had watched the oldest boy, the oldest horse thief, and he had watched the second, the oldest horse thief, and he thought, I'm gonna make me a good chair. So he made him a chair. He sanded it out real good. He made sure the nails were all in right. He put it together just right. Well, you know what? If you're a horse thief, you just eat and sleep, and then you get on your horse and you ride off and steal more horses. So off they went. Well, this little old girl was wandering around loose. She had gotten separated from her parents, who were on a wagon going somewhere. I don't know where they were going, but they came across the Sabine River and then they just went along. Well, that little old girl, she fell out. She fell out of that wagon, and they didn't notice it for 2 or 3 days. So she was just wandering around loose. She come up on that cabin where those horse thieves lived. First thing she did was she sat in the big old chair, because she was tired. She said, this chair is a nice chair, but it's too big for me. I can't make it rock. Well, she sat down in the second one, and you know what? She got a splinter in her hiney. She jumped up from there, and she pulled out that splinter, because she was a smart little girl. And then she went and sat in the other chair. And it was smaller, and it was made just perfect, and it was sanded out. It looked really nice, and she crawled up in it, and she said, I really like this here. And she found some food laying on the table that they had just walked off and left, like they did, because, you know, they were horse thieves. They were not people who cleaned up after themselves. And so she had a big old piece of chicken, and she chewed it up and ate it. And then there was some bread, and she ate that, and then there was some beer. Well, she didn't know what beer was, and she took a sip and went, ooh, this tastes nasty. But you know, she swallowed some of it because she's thirsty. So she was wandering around, and she went into their bedroom, and there was that bed ticking, and it was pretty good. She laid down on that cotton mattress, and it felt all right. But then she got to thinking about it, and it was awful hard. Oh. So she got up, and she laid down on the second bed, and it was full. You remember the kind of lame horse thief? He had just filled his with straw, and it didn't feel good at all. So she walked over to the other one, and she touched it, and it felt so soft. She crawled up and she went sound asleep. Well, you know, she just slept and slept because she'd been wandering around loose for 2 or 3 days, and that was the first meal she'd had. That was the first good sit down she had. And she had bug bites all over her because there's a lot of bugs in Orange County. And she had poison ivy all over her. And she just felt terrible. So she laid down and went sound asleep like you do when you're not feeling real good. Well, way up in the night, them old horse thieves rode back. They hadn't found a thing. They were going to have to sell the horses and the cattle that they robbed from that first night we were talking about. Well, they walked in the house and they looked around, and the chairs had all been moved around. And one of the horse thieves said, "Somebody's been here, and somebody ate up the rest of my groceries. I left a big old piece of chicken here and some bread, and it's all gone now. Just an old chicken bone." I don't know. And they looked around, they couldn't find nobody. They said, "I bet you that whoever it is in our bed." Well, they looked at the first bed, nobody there. They looked at the second bed, nobody there. But in the third bed, there was a little tow-headed girl. Her hair was bright, shiny, blonde. Mine used to be that way, but now it's all gray. Actually, I was a redhead. Anyway, there she was. And they looked down and said, "Hey, who are you laying in my bed?" And she said, "I'm Goldilocks, and I'm lost, and I want my mama." And the biggest one said, "Well, there ain't no mamas around here." She said, "I fell out of the wagon, and my folks just kept a-going, and they didn't know I fell out, and they aren't even looking for me." Well, that first horse thief said, "Well, we could use somebody around here that will cook." She said, "I don't know how to cook. I'm too little to cook." He said, "Oh." He said, "Well, can you polish boots?" She said, "No, I don't know how to polish boots." He said, "Can you steal stuff?" She said, "No, it's a sin to steal stuff. If you steal stuff, Jesus won't love you." Well, you know what? That little girl was plumb ornery, and she kept telling them what to do and what not to do. So that first horse thief, he put her on his horse, and he got behind her, and he took her all the way to Beaumont in a whole nother county, and found her daddy, and returned Goldilocks to her family because she was just too aggravating, always telling them, "Clean this up, clean that up." They didn't much like her, but they didn't want to hurt her, so they took her home to her mama and daddy. And as far as I know, they're all right. And those horse thieves, they got so aggravated about not stealing any horses that they moved off and went to Oklahoma. And that's the end of that story. I'm done.
People, wherever you are, thank you for listening to that last storyteller. What an amazing performance. And if you enjoyed it, the hat, look just below the story. If you're on the website, and I do encourage you to go to the website, and you can put a little in the hat. If you're in Texas, I've got a Texas hat here. I've got this in Kerrville. You could drop $1 in, or $2. If you're in England, you can drop £1 in, or more. If you're in Canada, well, you could drop a few dollars in. And maybe if you're right up north, Lapland. You could drop a few kroner in, or maybe €1 or 2. It will be much appreciated. Thank you. Don't forget the hat and enjoy the stories.